Want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Recently, I saw a discussion on the fantasy subreddit about who is the most prolific author out there. And a lot of people assume that it's Brandon Sanderson. And in the comments, it was a minor discussion. But people were saying, you know, it'd be fun to calculate out, to figure out what an average published words per day is for all of the main authors. And so I looked at that and I said, I would love to know that information. I'm a data freak. I would love to do that. So I spent a while accumulating the top 50 fantasy authors. And I calculated out to see what their average pages per day since they released their first book until they quit writing or current. And so I've got the 20. So we're going to talk about first we're going to talk about the top 10. And then we're going to talk about the bottom 10. So let's start with the 10th most prolific fantasy author, and that is Brian McClellan. Brian McClellan is the author of 2 different trilogies of the Powder Mage. He also has a few other books out there. One more recently that he's released is his new series. He only has 1 book out for it. And he started doing books in 2013, which is about 10 years now. You know, it's like almost 10 years exactly. And he's written 4,856 pages, and that comes out to 1.34 pages per day. Number 9 is going to be Jim Butcher. Jim Butcher has written 17 different Dresden books. He also has this other series called Codex Alera. He's been writing for about 23 years now, has a lot more pages, has almost 12,000, and he comes out to 1.41 published pages per day. So the dude has a ton of books. They're not super long. He's been writing for a really long time though, so kudos to him. Number 8 is Michael J. Sullivan. He is most famous for writing over 20 books in the 𝐒𝐸ra series. He has written for about 15 years now. He has about 7,800 pages. And he is slightly higher than Jim Butcher, and he comes in at 1.42. Number 7 is Mark Lawrence. Mark Lawrence has 5 different trilogies. He's written for about 12 years now, and this guy, you know, I thought he'd be even higher on this list. He's very prolific. It feels like every year he's got a book coming out. He's at about 6,200 published pages, and he's at 1.46. One up from him is John Gwynne. My man, I love John Gwynne. He's written The Faithful and the Fallen. He's written Of Blood and Bone, which is in the same series, and he's written 2 books in the Bloodsworn series. He has written for about 10 years now at about 5,500 pages, and he is at 1.48. So number 5 is the most impressive to me on this list, actually, even though it comes in at number 5, and this is Terry Pratchett. And I'm impressed by this because Terry Pratchett wrote books for about 45 years. And he wrote over 100 books. They're short, but that is prolific. And he is by far the longest writing author on this top 10 list. He wrote over 25,000 pages at 1.59 published pages per day for 45 straight years. That is really impressive. Number 4 is Rick Riordan, the only author on this that I have not read. He wrote Percy Jackson. He wrote for 26 years. He's at about 15,000 pages, and he's at 1.62. So now for these final 3, we're going to get some big jumps. So the last one was 1.6. The next one is 2.1, and that is Will White. Will White has written Cradle. He's written a couple more as well. He has written for only 10 years now and already has 7,700 pages. That's a lot for 10 years. And he's at, like I said, 2.18. One up from him should be a big shock to everybody that he's not number 1, and it is Brandon Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson has written for 18 years now. He's written about 19,000 pages, and he's at 2.95. So Will White was at 2.18. Brandon Sanderson is way higher at 2.95, and that is a ton. But he does not even come close to touching Pirate Abba. Pirate Abba writes The Wandering Inn exclusively. The Wandering Inn is a web serial that is being converted into books. So on any metric that you want to look at, Pirate Abba is definitely in the lead. So if you want to look at published pages only that are like in a book that you can buy, then this author has written for 5 years and has over 10,000 pages and is at 6.40. So over twice as much as Brandon Sanderson. Now, if you want to include all of the works that Pirate Abba has put out, which I don't think is fair because it's a web serial, but it's 14 pages per day. That's crazy. That is nuts to me. Pirate Abba is a machine, maybe literally is a machine, because I don't understand how it's possible to write that much. All right, now let us talk about the bottom 10. And before I go into the bottom 10, I just want to say that I'm not criticizing these authors at all. I am a big fan of letting authors write, let them go at their pace. Who cares when these books come out? They'll come out when they come out. So do not think that I am putting down any of these authors. I most certainly am not. But number 10 is Evan Winter. Evan Winter is the author of 2 books in the Burning series, and he came out with these 2 books over the course of 5 years. So it's about 1,000 pages, takes him 5 years to do it, and he comes in at 0.53 pages per day. Number 9 is Nicholas Eames. Nicholas Eames also has just written 2 books. He's written for about 6 years and just about 1,000 pages. So he is down at 0.47. But I love both those books. They're awesome. He's written The Band, and those books rock. And I use that term very intentionally. If you've read these books, you know what I'm talking about. Number 8 should be a little bit of a surprise because I think a lot of people think this author should be closer to number 1. It is J.r.r. Martin. J.r.r. Martin has written a ton of books. He has written long before he started writing A Song of Ice and Fire. He's written for 46 years. That's intense. He's written 6,900 pages in that time and comes in at 0.41 published pages per day. Number 7 is Andrzej Sapkowski. This is the author of The Witcher. He's still writing books, so hard at it. Written for 33 years and only written 4,600 pages in those 33 years. And that comes in at 0.38. So number 6 is Ursula K Le Guin. This is the author who wrote Earthsea and some other books as well. Wrote for a career spanning 40 years, but only did 5,600 pages. And that is 0.383. So like very, very, very tiny behind Andrzej Sapkowski. Number 5 is the biggest surprise on this list because I did a survey recently and I asked, what author do you think is the least prolific of all time? And by far, people said it was this author, and it is Patrick Rothfuss. Patrick Rothfuss has only written 2 books. In the Kingkiller Chronicle, it's taken him 16 years to write that, but they're both pretty long. They're about 1,000 pages each, coming in at a little over 2,000 pages, and that brings him to 0.355. And I think people think it's really bad because it has been a long time since he wrote those 2, but he did write those 2 pretty quick back to back, and they're long. But yeah, he's going to keep dropping if he doesn't come out with another book. Number 4 is somebody who I don't think deserves to be on this list, but they are anyways, and it is Philip Pullman. This is the guy who wrote His Dark Materials. He's written for a career spanning 51 years, and only in those 51 years only wrote 6,400 pages. And his amount is 0.34 published pages per day. So now we're going to get a big drop. And number 3 is the person who I thought would be number 1, and it is Scott Lynch. Scott Lynch wrote 3 Gentleman Bastard books. It's taken him 17 years to only write 1,700 pages. Bro, you need to get some books out. And he is, at least I believe he is. He's got a few novellas coming out, and he has the next book in his Gentleman Bastard series, hopefully coming out relatively soon. But he's in that Rothfuss, J.r.r. Martin range where it's been a long time and there's not a lot of trust, but we'll see. And his total is way lower at 0.28 per day. A big drop from that is Madeline Miller. Madeline Miller is number 2. She has written 2 books, Circe and Song of Achilles, over the course of 11 years, and that's 801 pages for 0.19 pages per day. And I get why hers is low because I think she's a teacher or like professor, and she studies a long time about history to write these books. She has another one coming out relatively soon, I believe. But nonetheless, no excuses on this video. You are number 2. And number 1 is J.r.r. Tolkien. He wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. It took him 36 years to get 1,800 pages out. And he comes down to 0.13. Now, he did have books that came out after he died, but they weren't finished and they needed editing work, and I'm not counting books that came out after you died. Because even if I did, he would still be last, because the books came out so much later after he died that, in fact, his score would be even lower than it is right now. So let's keep you at your higher score, J.r.r Tolkien. Now, I'll give you a pass also, because your books took a long time to be able to write, because of all the information that went into them, all the studying, literally developing languages. I get it. You get a pass, but nonetheless, you are officially the least prolific fantasy author of all time. So, those are my 20. Hope you enjoyed this little video, and as always, happy reading to you. Thank you so much to my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier patrons, Anna, Ben, CJ, Danu, Darren, Jamie, Michael Sugarman, My Book is Lit, Romeo Mike, Ron Reich, Russell, and Sky.